had a kind of a cultural imprint on them. Things that had been intentionally shaped by people. This is a very popular hobby in parts of the United States. But it's true, kind of plays out all over the world. We do this with animals, this with the Belgian blue. But it seemed the more that these things had been changed by people, the less likely they were to be represented in a natural history collection. That this wasn't just an oversight, this was an intentional omission. And it seemed like a blind spot, and a blind spot that seemed worth filling. And that essentially is where the idea for having a museum called the Center for Post-Natural History comes from. It started with a collection in the beginning, and this kind of grappling around for a word. It took a long time to arrive at the word post-natural. But the basic concept behind it is that these are living things that have been intentionally shaped by people, and that it's heritable, that it affects the offspring. So it has kind of evolutionary consequence. So like topiary gardening, if you clip your bushes into the shape of Mickey Mouse, that's not really post-natural. But if you can trick them into breeding so that they make little tiny Mickey Mouse plants, then that might be qualify, and especially if you're doing it on purpose. It doesn't count if it's insects that are mutated as a result of the Fukushima disaster, which is clearly a culturally created ecological disaster, but I would argue is not on purpose. So in the beginning, it was just a collection, trying to amass documents of these living things, the actual physical bodies, which turns out, and maybe I was naive in the beginning, this is very different from collecting photographs of things. The living body doesn't, it wants to decay, it wants to be food. It wants to either be alive and eat and shit, or it wants to become food. And the practice of natural history collections is to like remove them from that economy. We'll get more to that later. It's tricky business. But we would also make exhibits that will document the context that these organisms are in, their habitat. These organisms that we're changing, we're necessarily raising them in captivity. And that ecology is part of what changes their shape. So these are, genetically modified fish that you buy in pet stores in the US, which are illegal here, if any of you have them, but are all raised in the US by a single fish farm in Florida. I always kind of imagine if you were to shine a big ultraviolet lamp over these little fish ponds, they would kind of glow in different rainbow colors. And we build exhibits that even use the old-fashioned style telephones. If you go upstairs, this is what you'll see.